Hello, you're watching A Long Story Short. My name is Vineet Malhotra. Today we have the pleasure of having with us Dr. Vikram Sampath, who is a historian, somebody who's very well known in the country. He's also the author of 9 acclaimed books. His 2-volume biography, Savarkar, Echoes from a Forgotten Past, and Savarkar, A Contested Legacy. And his latest books, Brave Hearts of Bharat, Vignettes from Indian History, and Waiting for Shiva, Unearthing the Truth of Kashi's Gyanvapi, have gone on to become national bestsellers. Today, Vikram is going to be speaking with us on A Long Story Short on a diverse range of topics. Vikram, thank you so much for taking out the time and speaking with me.
Thank you, Vineet. Always such a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, I'm gonna, cut through the chase and start with the deep end of the ocean, like they say. Vikram, you've always spoken about history and how it has been misrepresented at a number of levels. We are taught a different kind of a history vis-a-vis a history that actually existed. And a large part of it, you have also, in fact, conveyed that on a number of platforms, has been concealed. How do you come to that conclusion? Because that's a big conclusion.
Yeah, I think the conclusion comes after years and decades of reflection and contemplation, both as a student of history and later as someone who started writing, in the subject and also professionally trained to be a historian. So in the process, I've realized that I think the history is a very potent tool in the hands of the rulers. And that's why I think George Orwell had said, he who controls the past controls the present and the future. So our colonial masters, the British, certainly understood this. And that's why a version of Indian history was imposed on us by them. But the sad part, Vineet, is that post-independence, instead of utilizing the golden opportunity that we had at that point of time to kind of take away these distortions which our colonial masters, then erstwhile masters, had imposed on us, we probably added a few more distortions to that version. Thanks to largely what could be termed as the Nehruvian Marxist ideological consensus on Indian historiography, which, as I've spoken on several forums, is replete with a lot of distortions and different ways of looking at history. Having said that, Vineet, I think history, as a very famous historian had said, every report of history is but an interim report. There is nothing final. There's nothing absolutist about it. So by its very nature and definition, the discipline should allow differences of opinion, should allow dissent, debate, discussions on differing viewpoints. And sadly, especially post-independence, we've had a very hegemonistic, a very monochromatic, and an ideologically tilted version of history, which doesn't brook any dissidence, which doesn't allow for another viewpoint to exist. And that is the sad part, which is what has made history such a live battlefield today in politics, in society, causing all these social schisms all the time.
Vikram, do you think that the governments of the past had no choice? But this distortion of history, like you very well articulated, was done deliberately. And of course, it's anybody's guess that it was done for vote bank politics.
No, indeed. Maybe, even at the time of India's independence, considering that this country was born out of bloodshed, of partition, which was on communal lines, the initial, foundational years, it could be possible that a lot of difficult, aspects of our long and stormy past, people decided, those in power decided that let's not talk about all these while we are setting the building blocks of a new nation. But to further embellish it with more distortions, to whitewash it, to whitewash crimes of the past, specifically targeting, communities, and as you rightly said, vote bank politics, I think that is being disingenuous with history itself. The one major example is, and that's the elephant in the room when one is talking about historiography in India. Even someone like an American historian, Will Durant, he calls the Islamic conquest of India as one of the bloodiest tales of human history. Right, but when we talk of our own history, all these aspects are somehow, supposed to be no-go areas. You're not supposed to talk about these controversial, aspects, with the, misapprehension that talking about all of this will somehow upset communities today. And to please those communities, or to, appease for vote bank, you will whitewash those crimes. You will make heroes out of people who were barbarians, who were invaders. Almost making, you are hyphenating communities with those people, while in reality the role of history should be to de-hyphenate communities of today, especially with barbaric characters of the past. So I think this fear to talk the truth or tell things as they were. Now, the Sanskrit word for history, or itihasa, is it thus happened. That is the literal translation of the word itihasa. So you should just tell things as they are, as the documents and the archives speak, rather than interpolate it with so much of contemporary political correctness, contemporary political considerations, and ideological leanings. Then you're presenting a completely different picture of what it actually was.
Vikram, that's a very interesting point. But, I'm going off script here. You said that this is something which obviously is going to offend a lot of people if spoken of. But is this
Yeah.
only true in context with India? People still talk about anti-Semitism, which was precipitated by the Nazis or the Germans. And if you go back into history, even by the Roman Empire, then why is this only particular to India? Why can't we talk about it?
Correct. I think, Vineet, that the very fact that after independence, the first 2 or 3 education ministers that we had belonged to a certain leaning, a certain community, this overwhelming, overbearing need to whitewash those crimes, which, as you rightly said, are spoken about everywhere. We talk about the Holocaust everywhere, but tell me, in places which suffered the Holocaust, you will never have a road named after Hitler. You will not be celebrating Hitler Jayanti there just because he was very sweet, he was a vegetarian, he loved dogs, he loved his daughter. Those may be some redeeming features of his personal life, but that doesn't detract from his overall legacy of being what he was. But in India, these small, things about someone's character are embellished so much to make a hero out of them. And therefore, even now, you step out of Nalanda University, the ruins, which breaks everybody's heart. If one goes there even today, the new Nalanda University just got resurrected, and the Prime Minister inaugurated that. Just close to that are the old ruins, and you can still see the burnt remains on the bricks, burnt grains of rice, which are still stuck to the granary walls there, which were burnt in a massive fire that Bakhtiyar Khilji, led to destroy these important sites of this country, the Princetons, the Harvards, and Oxfords of our nation.
There were books that were burned for
Books
almost
burned.
of years, I heard.
Yeah, no, several months, as per contemporary chroniclers. But despite that, just you come a little outside Nalanda, you will find the nearest railway station is Bakhtiyarpur, which actually honors a man who has destroyed the Oxfords of and Princetons of your country. I come from Karnataka, where someone like Tipu Sultan is commemorated with a Tipu Jayanti every year, while his atrocities against innumerable people in Karnataka, whether it's in Mangalore, the Christians, the Syrian Christians in Mangalore, the Mandyam Iyengars in Melkote and Srirangapatna, the Nayars in neighboring Kerala, in Malabar, the Konkanis, the Kodavas in Coorg. It's still part of oral history and intergenerational traumatic memory for many of these communities. But still, to ingratiate yourself to certain sets of people, you valorize this man and you celebrate his birth anniversary. Section 144 is imposed, and then people are forced to celebrate something. It speaks a lot about our perverse understanding of our own past. So as I said, Hitler's Jayanti being celebrated in Germany or Israel, this is almost as bad as that it gets here in India, where we don't have the gumption or the courage to talk the truth as it is. And we feel a whole host of people will get offended by this. My only question to that is, we openly talk about the atrocities of the British, what the East India Company did, right from the earliest governor generals down to even Churchill, who caused the Bengal famine, and we rightfully, berate him. While doing that, we don't think that this is going to offend the Christians of India, because all these people belong to the Christian community. Then why do we think, erroneously, that talking about Mahmud Ghazni and Ghori and Aurangzeb and Tipu Sultan and Bakhtiyar Khilji and all these kind of barbarians somehow will offend the Muslims of India? They should not. They are not their heroes. They should be dehyphenated from them, and they are not responsible for the atrocities that these people committed. But by converse, they should also not valorize these people and make heroes out of them, as their ancestors also, I think, suffered as much under the hands of these people.
Vikram, from what I know and our past conversations, you are writing a book on Tipu Sultan. So what you're saying there, there have been instances where we have glorified Tipu Sultan. Everybody remembers Sanjay Khan playing Tipu Sultan in that titular role. Is it time now to vilify Tipu Sultan? Is that what you're saying?
No, not at all. I don't think the role of history is either to vilify or eulogize. Like I said in my earlier response to, the role of history and historians is to present facts as they are. If there are certain redeeming characters of his, life and personality, which any human being would have. I mean, no one is fully black or fully white. There are lots of shades of gray, 50 shades of gray or more when it, I think, comes to human character. So I think one should be able to present that person with warts and all, as a complete human personality who also made a lot of mistakes. So there are a few redeeming characters of Tipu Sultan too, which in my forthcoming book, as you rightly said, it's called Tipu Sultan and the Saga of the Mysore Interregnum, which should be out by about November this year. I've tried to balance this out, while talking about some of the good qualities of his life and character. Of course, he was a valorous soldier. He fought several wars. He was daring and all of that. But alongside that was this very dark side of him, where he considered anyone who did not belong to his faith as kafirs, as a true follower of his faith, and also ensured that, the on his sword, the inscription was that the motive of the sword is to drench itself in the blood of the infidels. Now, these are facts that you cannot just say, I don't like it, so I will either censor it or whitewash it. So I think presenting it as it is, and this is a story, you can't wish away your past, however bad, however the good, bad, and the ugly. I think it needs to come as a package if you want to be objective and also comprehensive in your historical assessment.
Vikram, let's also talk about Veer Savarkar. You more or less are considered an authority on his life. You've written a great couple of books on him. Do you think that his contribution in history has also been undermined? And had it not been for your book, whatever he did, would have been slipped into oblivion?
I wouldn't want to be so presumptuous, Vineet, but yeah, thank you.
But you did bring back the
feel that
limelight onto Savarkar. That's definitely that's definitely true. If you ask the younger generation, they are not aware of Veer Savarkar. They know him through your work and perhaps now the movie.
Correct. Yeah, I think he was a cult figure in Maharashtra and probably continues to be. And there was a lot of literature that came up in Marathi, whereas I think outside the borders of Maharashtra and particularly in the rest of India, the very fact that he didn't figure, at least in my growing up years, I don't know how it was for you, but in our growing up years, school textbooks of history, I don't think there was any reference to him. No. Neither to him or even to Port Blair and the Kala Pani prison and some of the several other contemporaries, the revolutionaries from Bengal, from Maharashtra, from Punjab and other places who suffered the worst of atrocities there. So there too, Vineet, I think a very, very simple, linear kind of version of what got India her freedom, was presented to us. So through my 2 volumes on Savarkar, of course, while it is about the life and times of Savarkar, very, very stormy, 80 plus years that he lived, but alongside it's also this version of an alternative parallel path of the freedom movement, which was the armed revolution, the armed struggle, which started in 1857 with the uprising, which Savarkar called the First War of Indian Independence, till 1946, where you had the naval mutiny in Bombay then, which is what heralded finally the freedom of our country. And through this entire period, barring a few, blips, the armed struggle continued unabated, in our country. And I think the story of the revolutionaries almost gets a footnote in history. They were just these bunch of misguided, hot-blooded young men who threw bombs here and there, and then were, hung from the neck. But I think there was a lot more to the revolutionary movement, the Gadar movement, which spread its tentacles outside India, even in Canada and San Francisco and all those places, including Southeast Asia, right from there to the various secret societies and organizations that came up. So I think Savarkar fits in right into this large pantheon of revolutionaries. And it is very, very sad that, he's also become a victim of political considerations. And someone of the eminent stature of the former Prime Minister of India, Srimati Indira Gandhi, a tall Congress leader, probably one of the tallest, even she, when Savarkar passed away in 1966, had very eulogizing things to say about him, that his name was a symbol of daring, of courage, of patriotism, and has a very special place in the annals again of freedom struggle. And during his birth centenary in 1983, she also gave a generous grant from her own side, from her own expense, about 40,000 rupees those days, to set up a memorial for him. A stamp came up in his honor. You had a documentary film made on him by the government of the time. So it is not as if Srimati Indira Gandhi didn't know that, Savarkar was a British stooge, a coward, a Gandhi assassin, accomplice, a Islamophobe, all these epithets that are, thrown at him now. I'm sure if they were true, she would have known about that as well. And knowing that she would not be just paying homilies to someone who is fundamentally so flawed. So I think this is exactly how contemporary politics, just as we eulogize some people, like we just discussed, we also tend to demonize those who don't fit the mainstream narrative or the straitjacket. And Savarkar, I think, typifies or personifies that very tendency that exists today to make villains out of people who've actually sacrificed and contributed so much for our country.
Vikram, you also said some time ago that India needs to reclaim its history from Delhi. What did you mean by that?
You're sitting in Delhi and you're a Delhiite. I hope I don't get flagged.
That's why I want to know. That's why I want to know.
So, this again, as my reflections about how we studied history.
Did you mean Lutyens Delhi? Did you mean Lutyens Delhi?
Lutyens Delhi sits and decides what the rest of India needs to read. It decides the media perspective too, where otherwise, the tyranny of distance, as they say, what's happening in the northeast or south doesn't even catch the attention of Lutyens Delhi. So similarly, I think they craft also the narrative of our history. So every small little dynasty that has ruled in and around Delhi, the Lodhis, Khiljis, Tughlaqs, and of course the Mughals, who were more, eminent than the others. We study in detail about all of them in our school books, and every child knows these. There's popular cinema, popular media that eulogizes these people as well. Whereas large swathes of this country, I think, remain underrepresented. The south of India, from where I come from, it has had some of the most illustrious dynasties of this country, very chivalrous too. Cholas, the Pandyas, the Rashtrakutas, the Shatavahanas, Pallavas, the Vodiyars of Mysore, or the northeast of India. I don't know how many people in this country would even be able to name 2 or 3 Ahom kings, the Ahoms who ruled for 600 years, or the Manikya rulers of Tripura, people like this who are as much a part of, the history of Bharat or India, as we call it. So Kashmir, we would know recent history, but going back to the Karkota dynasty or the Lohara dynasties, the Hindu history of Kashmir, there's so little known. And if you look at even the NCR,
people who perhaps know more about the Vikings and the Crusades, than some of the dynasties that lived in India.
Right. Exactly. And again, the just I think 2 days back there was an educational portal which even I called out on social media. The Martand Sun Temple, the ruins of the Martand Sun Temple, the glorious one in Srinagar, which was constructed by Lalitaditya Muktapida of the Karkota dynasty, which lay in ruins after it was ruthlessly pulled down by Sikandar Butshikan of the Shahmiri dynasty of Kashmir. There was a Bollywood film which called this place, so there was a song and dance sequence in those ruins, which called the place Shaitan Ka Ghar, Shaitan Ki Gufa, or something like that. And an education portal in its education material says the Martand Sun Temple, also known as Shaitan Ka Ghar, is what it is and has a whole description about it. So, this is where our ignorance of our own past and how we represent it, and this whole limitation in and around a particular region, whereas large parts of India don't feature in the manner that they should be. And that's why one of my books called Brave Hearts of Bharat did exactly that, to pick out 15 unsung heroes and heroines from various parts of India, right? From Kashmir and Punjab and Rajasthan to all the 4 southern states, to Manipur, to Assam and UP, and every part of India should feel that they belong to this larger narrative of what Bharatiya Itihas is all about.
Hmm. Uh, Vikram, what's your thought on renaming of cities, and how does that help in terms of, for the lack of a better word, contextualization of our history?
That Vineet, I think it's perhaps the easiest and the laziest thing to do because all you need to do is bring out a notification to change the name of some place or street. Aurangzeb Lane in Delhi getting converted to APJ Abdul Kalam Marg, or whatever it is called now. This is a very simple thing to do. It doesn't require too much of scholarship. It doesn't require too much of work to do. Of course, it raises a lot of heckles. But I think for the common person on the streets, who need not be too interested in the nuances and multiple layers of scholarship and books, the very fact that these people will not be eulogized, it does alter one's consciousness. So if Bakhtiyarpur no longer remains Bakhtiyarpur, people in and around that place would know that he's not a person that I need to reverentially look up to. And also world over, this is not happening only in India. You have the Confederate statues, you had Pizzo, all these people's statues, that including Churchill's, that came down recently in that Black Lives Matter, movement abroad, and the constant, reclamation drives to get rid of despots, to get rid of people who did not fit the modern, definitions of what leadership needs to be. This is happening worldwide. So why in India should that reclamation not happen? When metro cities were renamed, Bombay became Mumbai, and Calcutta became Kolkata, and Madras became Chennai, Bangalore, Bengaluru. That was also renaming to reclaim the linguistic, origins of that city, to reclaim or decolonize oneself from what a foreign power had come and happily renamed our cities because they couldn't pronounce Tiruvananthapuram, so it became Trivandrum, so which is easy for them to pronounce. So we went back to those old names there. So similarly, when you rename places based on, is the person after whom it has been named, is he worthy of that reverence? Is he or she worthy of having an entire city or a street named after him? I think that is exactly the same kind of decolonization that we saw in the 80s and 90s when all these metro cities got renamed.
Hmm. Vikram, how important do you think it is for India to make peace with its past? And do you think if this exercise is conducted in all its honesty, there could be some sort of a communal fallout, and perhaps today's politicians could be averse to it?
I agree. I think these are fissures on which a lot of politics thrive. And every time that is resolved, there is nothing to pit people against each other and make them fight. And that's how one divides and rules. But you're right, Vineet. I think we've really never ever made peace with that past, looked it into the eyes, stared at our own demons, and said, peace and move forward. Let's make do with this. Let's tell things as they are. And I think very importantly, there are those two things that I mentioned earlier. The communities of today are not responsible for what all happened, the bad things. Similarly, on the converse, communities of today should not hyphenate themselves, should not associate or look up to some of these, evil characters as their heroes. I think both of this needs to happen. And that's how, I mean, in South Africa, you had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. When Desmond Tutu came there, you had the whole process of Ubuntu, or you forgive, there, of course, the victim and the perpetrator were still alive. They looked each other into the eyes and then said, we forgive you. Here, the victims and the perpetrators are all dead, but there is still intergenerational, trauma. I, talked about that in my latest book on Kashi Vishwanath temple called Waiting for Shiva, where for generations our forefathers have been fighting to reclaim that space, which is today called the Gyan Vapi Masjid, which is very much part of their reverential, past. So making peace with some of this, with a sense of give and take on both sides, without hardened positions. I don't think compromise, peace, communal harmony can be a one-way street. It has to be a two-way process where both or all communities meet one another halfway in a sense of, generosity, brotherhood, amity. The albatross of that cannot be put, as always it has been since independence, on the shoulders of just one community, in this case, the majority community of India.
Vikram, do you think that this government has tried to right some of the historical wrongs that have been existing for so long? And the big question is, why now? Why in the last few years? Why did not anybody try this earlier on?
Yeah, I think
Is
some
the
of the
timing
things that
convenient?
correct. So in the last 10 years, Vineet, I think some of the things, at least the visible, icons of importance. I just, drove past India Gate while I was in Delhi a couple of days ago. And it felt so good to see for yet again Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's statue there under the canopy, where Emperor George was there. And it was empty for several years, decades after that statue was removed. That it took 70 years to actually honor the man whose contribution perhaps, was primordially important in getting India her, independence. I think that speaks a lot for itself. So several such, the reclamation or the importance given to Sardar Patel, to some of the tribal icons. I think this government has also come up with a museum for tribal freedom fighters, right from Birsa Munda and several others like that. And some of the heritage and civilizational, heroes, whether it is Shankaracharya and Ramanujacharya and all of these people who have been at least put into perspective. As I said, the most easy and the lazy things to just make statues, to rename, streets, which is the first part, at least that has been done. What has not been done is to, after so long, even changes in the way we study our history, that continues to remain what it is, which is what, is the actual impact. A statue or a renamed road is just that much that it can help. But finally, what are you reading about that person as a child who's growing up in India today? That is what I think matters a lot more. But several of these are so commendable. The Indian Navy's insignia being changed, to Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj's, the emblem, including the tunes that were played for the Republic Day parade also, Abide With Me and so on. These were colonial hand-downs, which we just blindly copied without even giving a thought. So I think the first foundational steps of decolonization, at least of the mind, have been set now. And it needed, I think, a government, a set of people who thought in that fashion, who've come, bottoms up, from the grassroots, and not literally being just the last brown sahib, as one of our earlier prime ministers loved to call himself as.
You're talking about Nehru, I suppose.
विवाद हो जाएगा.
Vikram, we've almost run out of time. I also want to know I know you're not a politician. I also want to know your take on the election results. We saw what happened in a place like Ayodhya, you had the Ram Mandir, but still people voted differently. Do you think, there comes a time when roti kapda or makan is perhaps more important, than consolidation of your history and your religion?
I'm not too sure of that, Vineet, because I don't know when we say they lost Ayodhya, was it Faizabad, which had several segments, and what it was in Ayodhya vis-a-vis the rest of the district? I'm really not aware of that, because as you only prefaced it, I have no interest in politics or elections beyond what a common Indian has. But I think on Roti Kapda Makan, I think the Modi government has been more welfareist than several socialist governments of the past. Some of the fundamental things you would not imagine that a prime minister of this country would talk about toilets for women from the ramparts of the Red Fort, where otherwise you would wax eloquent about all kinds of other, abstract matters, or about foreign policy and strategy and so on, which is what previous prime ministers would do. The very fact that the government in its last 2 terms actually did deliver on Roti Kapda Makan too, whether it was, the Ujjwala scheme for gas cylinders, for water in your wells, for, a proper house, a roof over your head, free ration after COVID, all these things, and the highways, airports that were constructed in different tier
Right.
2, tier 3 cities, educational aims and IIMs and IITs, which were not limited only to a few cities, but across various places. So I think they did deliver there. I think the Indian voter is a very complex mind, and it's not a monolith. So every state, every region, I think, decides very differently. There is no common narrative. And there could be various other mistakes also, which the BJP must have done in the
Right.
way it allotted seats, in the way it allotted tickets to its aspirants, infighting within, a sense of arrogance and hubris also, which probably set in you start feeling you're invincible. All of that, and the way the opposition also managed to snatch the narrative back. The constitution is going to change, make particularly the SCs and so on feel that reservation was going to go away. You saw the deep fake video doing the round. So all these factors would have contributed. I don't think the fact that they built the Ram Mandir, or tried to make decolonize our history is something that lost the elections. I don't know if that is a good inference to make. I think there's a host of other factors which could be analyzed by a good political analyst and a psephologist, not a historian.
I still wanted to know that from you. Vikram, really appreciate you joining us. There's always such a pleasure speaking with you, and so much to learn, not only in terms of our historical correctness, but of course, what went on, because we're no longer in school. And of course, every time I speak to you, something or the other from my childhood or school days gets revisited. Thank you so much for taking out the time and speaking with me.
Thank you. Thank you, Vinny. Thanks so much.